Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. My name is Paul Stringini. Just having technical difficulties this morning. So, that's all done. But we were left off with the abomination of desolation. When you shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, staying in the holy place. We covered that very thoroughly, what that all means. And so, and then there was invocation there, whoso readeth, let him understand. You know, that's a kind of an unusual thing in the Bible. There's not a lot of that sort of breaking the third wall, so to speak, directly addressing the idea that you might be reading it. There's some of that in the letters of Paul, but not in the Gospels, you know. And I think that's because, you know, it's given in a bit of a code, right? The abomination of desolation. One of the last things I talked about was like how Mystery Babylon is called Mother of Harlots and Abominations. Think about that. Mother of abominations. What she brings forth is an abomination. Contrast that with what the angel said to Mary. She said, that holy thing, or the angel said to her, that holy thing which is conceived within you shall be called the Christ, the Son of the living God. I don't know if that's an exact quote, but we also have a holy thing conceived within us, which is the image of Christ being formed in us. Oops. I just think that's an interesting contrast. You think about what she gives birth to sort of is something abominable. Something which is essentially the opposite of holy, right? I mean, well, holy, profane is technically the opposite of holy. But, abomination would be the extreme edge of profane. Not just that which is common, but that which is repulsive. Hold on a second. That which is rejected. Not just that which is inappropriate, but that which is filthy. You know, the union with Satan brings forth abomination. It brings forth things that cannot be allowed to exist. So when this abomination of desolation appears, when you see it standing where, does it say it? Standing in the holy place. We covered in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the scripture there where it says, you know, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Showing himself doesn't mean like reflexively, like looking in the mirror, look at me, I'm God. What it means is putting on a display. Like you could say, I'm sitting here making I'm showing myself that I'm a teacher. Look at me, I'm a teacher, you know. And just the same thing with the abomination of desolation. He's going to show himself, look at me, I'm God. Or when you see that, when you see someone stand in the holy place, whatever that happens to be, whether that be is a rebuilt temple, whether it's just the place of the Temple Mount, or something else. You know, one of the interesting things I was thinking about the beast, and this is another possibility. I don't think it's an extremely likely one. I'm going to say it because I think there is a. Well, and there are two beasts in Revelation 13. One really seems to be an individual. The other one could be construed to be a collective, because it has 7 heads and 10 horns, which is an image of like an inverted hierarchy. Usually at the top you have one man. And, and the beast is sort of an agent of disorder meaning things aren't ordered properly. As you go, it's like it could be a rule by bureaucracy. It's a little off. But then the beast is off. At least the beast itself, the first beast. I don't know that the beast itself is indeed the Antichrist, so they make the image of the beast and cause as many as would not worship the beast to be killed. The image of the beast. But then it says they worship the dragon, which gave life unto the beast and power to the beast. I identify the dragon more with the Antichrist personally, but like I said, I just want to mention that in passing. Just because, Antichrist, you have to, at the time, it may not be obvious that what we're looking at is Antichrist, but they will be worshiping it. At least, and here's the thing. I did a study on worship, what it means to worship. It means to bow and obey and to do what it says. Like, worshiping God is not just about ostentatiously getting up in front of people and just, I mean, that is a form, that is an outward expression. It's only symbolic of what's really going on. When I worship before Him, I bow. But the bowing, and like I said, I did a study on worship. You can find it on my website, oraclesofgod.org, on the studies page. The imagery of bowing means to consent or to give one's assent to the authority of another, and to do the other's will. Worship of God is a day-to-day thing. It is a continual, bending of your will, your head, of your direction. It's saying, I submit myself to God's will. And it's a daily thing to be a worshiper of God. How many of us really, outside of church, do you get down on your hands and knees and worship? Occasionally you might. I've done it on occasion, right? But maybe some people, I know people who every day they get on their knees and pray. It's wonderful. You bow your head in prayer. In fact, every time we pray, usually we bow our heads. Though because people always did that, I had a tendency to lift my eyes towards heaven. But actually, I do have a more nuanced thought on that now. Because when I was young, I was often contrary for merely the sake of being contrary. Just because I questioned everything. I questioned, why do we do this? Why do we do that? What's the justification for this? It's probably very tiresome for my elders. No doubt. But, bowing your head in prayer is symbolically good. I dislike now the lifting my eyes to heaven because the Spirit of God has entered into me. And so He's right at hand. It's fine to bow my head. I'm not saying I'm looking down into me, so to speak, but I'm bowing my head before Him because He is present. That's fine. If you want to lift your eyes up to heaven, it's fine, but if you've received the Holy Spirit, you got to know internally that He is with you, in you, and present with you, and not in a distant, far off, who knows where. And even if He isn't in you, as Jesus said, He dwelleth with you and shall be in you, because the Spirit is everywhere, and that's the nature of God. He is everywhere. He is not limited to a place in this universe. The heaven is not a planet. This isn't Marvel Comics gods who dwell up in a cloud city in the whatever off the Rainbow Road. God is interdimensional, multidimensional, and I don't even know if that's a proper definition. I don't know that defines Him, but certainly He transcends dimensions. He transcends the material world. Because, I don't know what that means. It's like, of course you don't, because you're limited to the material world. It's hard for you to conceptualize something that transcends the material world. Well, it's just a bunch of gobbledygook. That's what you'll get from atheists if you start talking about transcending anything. Because they don't like that idea. They don't want to allow. They only want to allow what they can lay their fingers on. And in that, if it's only what we can lay our fingers on, then we have no conversation. It's not what I can lay my fingers on. It's what can lay its fingers on me. And God has laid his fingers on me, so that's why I'm a believer. Let him understand who reads. All right, whatever, we digressed. I could sit there talking all day about the abomination of desolation and the opposite, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. When you see this abomination standing in God's holy place, that's why, they worship the dragon. Oh, I wanted to finish up that thought. Worship, bowing. If you can worship the beast, as Jesus said, don't you know that whoever you yield your members to obey, that's who's your master is? If we're doing the works of Satan, we're already worshiping Satan. Now, you may look at every little sin you commit and start saying, like, oh my God, I can't, how can I be of God and of Satan? Well, because humans are a contradiction and you're in a process of sanctification. But because you believe on the Lord, you need to regard yourself as all his, right? And believe in your heart that his transformative power is going to convert you from being sinful and unworthy into a person who is more like him. That's the transformative power of the Spirit of God in you. That's what it does. Changes you. You have to keep the faith. You have to be mindful of it. Be careful about it, right? But don't despair of your lack of progress if you have that. I've gone through times of rapid change and times where things just kind of stay the same for a long time. And I see no profit in, taking on the attitude of one who thinks like, well, I guess that means I'm not of God. There's no point. If you want to be, then be. If then believe it. There's no, Jesus always talks about have faith and doubt not. And you may doubt anyways, but well, then have more. Try again. Try again. Don't give up. That's always been my position on it, because I like to hold us to a higher standard than maybe many people do. I don't know. As far as I want to see people perfected in Christ, but also you have to have an understanding that's like it just doesn't happen to people like that. I've heard people talk about well, I came this and from that on never sinned again. And it's like, well, I don't know. It's like, well, I've met people who kind of led me. They didn't actually say, sometimes they'll bluff about it. But the point is, no man can serve two masters. That's true. You can't serve sin and serve righteousness. Why? Because Jesus says, either you will hate the one and love the other, or hold to the one and despise the other. So, what that says to me is that it's an unstable situation. When we serve sin and we serve righteousness, we are in an unstable situation. One side has to prevail. You can't stay in that position. So, all it means is you are in a state of motion either towards absolute destruction or towards the living God. And, that's something you have to ultimately it's what's in your mind. Where are you going? What direction are you headed in? And here's the thing is part of what gets you to do the right thing is to mentally condition yourself. I always pray when I'm praying, I'm praying, I want to move towards righteousness in every way. I want to have the things that I don't do right revealed to me, and I want to confront them and defeat them. And that's how you defeat the devil now and under whatever circumstances you may find yourself. So when this abomination appears and people are worshiping, whether it be obvious or not, like I said, they will serve him. Serving him is a form of worship. Obeying him is a form of worship. But I think it will be rather overt. Okay, I just warn you against the more subtle, because it's important to be warned is to be armed. I say warmed? I meant warned. Warned. I guess so. Warned. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take up his garment. Or, I'm reading Mark 13 from memory. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. What is he saying in those first 3 verses? What he's saying is like, there's an immediate danger coming. Like, it's not time. Don't go get your clothes. Don't turn back. If you're in Judea when you see that happening, get away from there as quickly as you can. It's not, and I don't even know if this is like the 2 witnesses are going to be slain there. With Satan proclaiming himself to be God, or the Antichrist, and then they will, the beast which ascendeth out of the bottomless pit, which is actually, well, here's the thing, is like, it's not clear which beast. One beast rises up out of the sea, another one rises up out of the earth. So some combination of the two. Which beast comes out of the bottomless pit? I know that the dragon gets bound in the bottomless pit later on, and the beast itself is sort of an image of the dragon. So literally, if you're there, run away, I guess. But what it's saying is like, this is the moment. This is, you want to know when the end of the world is? When you see that. All the other stuff he was saying, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars, famines and pestilences, and don't be troubled about that. When you see the abomination of desolation, that's trouble. That's why he says, let them flee to the mountains. So if you're on the housetop, don't just get out of there ASAP. Don't even bother going back into your house. And that's what he's saying. It's so immediate. It's so dangerous. It's better, don't mess around. Get away. He's speaking of the immediacy of the danger. And so that's what I wanted to say about that. The immediacy of the danger. And the point I said about the 2 witnesses being slain there is because, like, well, some people are going to have to be there, whether they want to or not. But it's a dangerous place to be. And woe to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. One of my least favorite favorite verses in the Bible. One of my least favorites. Woe to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. And I remember, Arnold Murray, I give him credit where credit is due. Now and not that I think it's due credit, but I'm just giving him credit because this is where I learned it from. I take this kind of like more as I just did. It's like being pregnant. But he would say, "Oh, it's fine for pregnant women." Arnold Murray's conceptualization is this. It has to do with the basically I talk about Mystery Babylon. What he says is they are sort of impregnated, or she's mother of harlots and abominations, and she is impregnate with the seed of the serpent, meaning she has taken in Satan and accepted him as her metaphorical husband in the stead of Christ, and has become impregnated with abominations and harlots. Okay? And so, she is mother of abominations. And so he applies this verse to that idea. And, on a symbolic level, it's true. I mean, woe to that, woe to the whore. Come with me and I will show you the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. She's the fornicator, and she got pregnant. She's pregnant with Satan's baby. It's a metaphorical baby, right? And that is the abomination formed in, like if I were to serve Satan, I would have something formed in me that would make me an abomination, as opposed to having the seed of God in you and being and having an image of Christ growing up inside you and manifesting itself outwardly also. Because, you can't have it in you without it coming out of you. Out of the heart proceeds all the righteousness of men, as well as the evil, as Jesus taught. Out of the heart proceeds forth murder, fornication, and all the evils that men conceive of in their minds. They start there. It starts in the heart. So he uses that pregnancy narrative to here. And that's fine. And that could very well be true. I won't dispute the possibility of that being an interpretation, but I will dispute the idea that it is the interpretation. There are other interpretations of this. When he talks about going out and don't come down off the housetop, don't let him that is in the field not turn back again for the take of his garment. It's dangerous. That's part of the meaning. And whenever there's a war upheaval, it sucks to be pregnant or nursing a baby. And, and I'd like to say, like, oh, it's going to be fine for pregnant mothers. In the tribulation, there's going to be a special little queue off to the side where Jesus gathers all the pregnant mommies and their babies, and they aren't subject to any of the bad things that happen. Just like in Noah's Ark, when Noah gathered up all the babies and put them in a little stall. Because they didn't reach the age of what do they call it? The age of knowing better. Because they were innocent. I did a study on this channel called, do you know, have you ever heard of Jesus, the pregnant woman killer? It's like there's nothing particularly holy about a human child. We are commanded to regard all lives, men should not take men's lives. Like, I didn't do anything to earn my life. I got born into this life, didn't earn it, and in living, I haven't paid back the debt. And people like they get student loans and they can't pay them back, right? Because they get a useless education that barely earns them enough living to just survive. So how can they pay back a loan? Especially if they got some useless degree. It's one thing if you got like, oh, I got an engineering degree. Well, you'll have that loan paid off in a little while. But well, what about? I got a degree in I don't want to say I was gonna say the obvious, but I was gonna say something like gender studies, okay, something silly like that. But seriously, unless you're gonna become a professor of that subject, like I've got a degree in English literature. It's a great thing to study, but if you have a degree in it, how many your jobs prospects? It's not going to be big paying stuff necessarily. For the most part, unless you're an extremely exceptional person, like you're going to be a writer and you've got talent and all the stuff. But the thing is to make it to the top of that field, rough. Just like most musicians are not rich rock stars. Like the cliche of like they perform and they have they get all this money, they have all this excess. That's not the average. For that kind of, you study that. You study something big, you get a loan, but a lot of people, they can't pay it off. All right, whatever. Point is, I never earned life. What a digression. It's like a student, like I said, I can't pay off the debt either. So that would be something I would have edited in the old days. I would have just gone out like, that analogy went nowhere. It was just like this. That's why I hate analogies, because you get distracted by them. Trying to perfect the analogy, and then all of a sudden you lose track of the point. We are not owed existence. We do not earn our existence. We do not deserve to come into existence. But being here, and being, here we are just caught up in this existence. We just came into it being. We have no right to go to another person and say, no, you don't deserve to be, and take their life. We have no right. And that's why we look at the death of other humans as being, it's one of our greatest taboos, right? Murder. I can get a 50 godless atheists, and they'll all agree with me that murder should be wrong and morally excluded. We shouldn't allow it. And by atheists, I mean moral atheists, because there are other kinds. There are many kinds, actually. But because there's some people who don't believe in God who have other beliefs. Meaning that they believe, they believe in, they're amoral. I mean, you just watch documentaries on serial killers, stuff. There you go. But people agree we shouldn't do murder, because we can't give life, we can't pay for it, we can't replace it. We've got no, our claim to it is sort of, what is my claim? Like, why do I deserve to live? And why does someone else deserve to die? Who has done nothing, like a baby? So for us, it is a total taboo. But for God, it's not. If God sends plagues and it kills, it's like, that's not immoral for God. And protecting women and children is something we care about, or we ought to. And does God care about it? Well, he can. If he does, that's his graciousness, his goodness. But if he doesn't, it's fair. There's a point I made many times. It's fairness. For dust thou art, and to dust thou shalt return. That's what the judgment of God says to man. I made you out of dust, and that's where you go back. It's the harsh, fair judgment of God. And whether a baby never comes out of the womb, or whether it merely gets to the suckling age, what claim does anyone have? I have a right to be here. None of us has a right to be here. What it is you don't have. What you also don't have is the right to kill someone else. But God has that right. He's not one of us. So he can say, "Look out, women and children, because it's not gonna pass you over." I mean, look at Egypt, the firstborn, from the smallest to the greatest. But pray ye that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day. That's an interesting coupling. Not in the winter, for obvious reasons. You ever seen pictures of the Armenian death march from World War, or was that one? Yeah, of course it was. During World War I, when the Ottomans basically force marched the Armenians in winter across the country, killing untold, I don't know the exact number, but many, many of them. Or the gulags that sent them up into the Siberian. And the Russians didn't keep good records. Well, they kept, I don't know, what did they keep? Well, they didn't tend to photograph all the horrors that they visited on their own people. So pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. Winter flight being, how'd you like to be a pregnant mother running away in the winter? The Sabbath day seems like an odd thing to include, to tell you the truth. But I suppose it was because they were forbidden. Or in some way unprepared on the Sabbath day? Is that it? It's a bad day to go. I guess because the impulse will be like, well, we can't travel. It's the Sabbath. I think it goes back to, like I said, Jesus is what he's saying is he's drawing a picture of the immediacy and the degree of the danger. It's extremely dangerous. Look out, women with children. You better hope it's not in winter or on the Sabbath. He's just sort of piling on all the circumstances. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. That's why we call it the Great Tribulation. Though, honestly, that word in the King James, after a while, I get sick of the word tribulation. It's just because it's, I don't know, tribulation. It just got a funny sound to it. It's a funny word. We don't use it for anything else anymore. And well, people say, well, he's got to have all kinds of trials and tribulations, but it's got a very, it's just one of those arcane words that sounds a bit weird to me now. As far as I don't know, just all the televised prophets, to tribulation, it's just, I don't like using the same language that they use. Yeah, I mean, Tribulation Force, the book. Yeah, it's fine, but it's like, you know, it's just a little bit, it rings in my ear. It sounds silly. Tribulation. You know, ebulations. It's got a lot of syllables. Whatever. I wonder what those roots are. Is it trouble? Tribulation? I've never even really looked into the etymology of the English word, and I'm not going to do it now. It's totally unnecessary. I believe it means trouble, though, in Greek. What's the Greek word there? Let's just pop that in. I wish I didn't have my live dashboard up. Okay. What is the Greek word? I'm just curious. In the meantime, while I look that up, I'll say this. Subscribe to Line by Line Bible Studies. You can click on the like button. That's fine. You can look at oraclesofgod.org. I have a lot of studies there on the studies page. You will find all kinds of studies, including that worship studies. It's one of the ones near the top. The funny thing is that in a short time I've added so much. I can now say I have hundreds of hours instead of just dozens of hours. I stopped counting a while ago, but as far as on my website, like how many hours total there were. But with this daily live stream, it's just sort of multiplying. Even though I do think the quality is down a little bit. Sorry. Can't help it. All right. So, I hate when they define the word with the word thypsis. You know what thypsis is in Greek? Oh, and it means tribulation. Okay, whatever. I believe tribulation means trouble. Like I said, trials and tribulations. I've never questioned the meaning of the word. If you have a question, you can send. If you want to question the meaning of the word, you can send your question to questions@oraclesofgod.org. I'm gonna look at the chat. Nothing in the chat. Cool. Not that I dislike comments in the chat, but it's fine if there isn't. Go back to this mode. Bring up the text. Okay. So, nothing like this has ever happened. This is going to be the most troublesome time since the beginning of the world. And there'll be nothing as troublesome as this. Nothing is... no greater upheaval. It's just a bad time to be in that area, especially if back to the women and the infants. What he's saying is the most vulnerable. I mean, that's what pregnant and nursing women are vulnerable. You know, that is the most vulnerable period of a woman's existence, is when she's either pregnant, especially close to the birth. The closer you get to the birth, the more it's sort of like, you know, you don't go flying across the country when you're 9 months pregnant. You know, I think, why would you? You don't go driving, you know, across the state when you're not, at least not unless, I mean, you might, but I mean, it's like you want to sort of like settle down and get ready for what's about to happen, you know? You don't want to be in some inconvenient position, you know, like far from home, you know, hiking on a mountain, you know, you might give birth someplace warm and cozy. I mean, even look at the birth of Jesus. They were traveling, and he had to be born in the place where they feed the animals, the manger. So, you know, they're vulnerable at that time. So, like he's saying, you know, he's characterizing it in these stark terms of like the absolute danger and the vulnerability. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Then, and I'm going to address that more. I've already addressed that in earlier studies. We'll address that a little more after we get a few more verses. Then if any man shall say to you, lo, here is Christ, or lo, he is there. Oh, there's no lo there. That's from Mark. Okay. Then if any man shall say unto you, lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets. What did I do? Okay. And shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. In Mark, he says that that is the actual reason why the days were shortened. Going back to verse 21. No flesh would be saved. No one, alive on the earth. No person living in flesh is what that, I take that to mean. No flesh living. I don't think it means necessarily, I think it means saved in terms of salvation, because he talks about deceit, being deceived. That the whole world would absolutely go after the beast, after the Antichrist. That the whole world, and in fact, that is the language Revelation uses. All the world wondered after the beast. They said, who is like unto the beast? Who can make war with him? And they worship the beast. They worship the dragon. Which gave power to the beast. Well, they worship the beast. And they worship the dragon, which gave power to the beast. And they worship they worship the dragon, which gave power to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? Sometimes all those words get jumbled up in your head. I mean, because I don't have a lot of actual, like, where I sit around memorized verse numbers, and it's just from long association and from the songs I write. So sometimes I have to like kind of rewind the tape in my mind and just kind of play it back. Okay. But for the elect's sake, those days should be shortened. Elect. The days are shortened for the elect. What does elect mean? It means we have elections where you go out and you vote and you choose a president. Election means selection. And it means those who are selected by God. I said the way people treat election these days, though, many of them, not all, of course, because there are plenty of people who understand election. But the way it's treated among many denominations is election means you select God. Or you have selected God, therefore you are elect. And I understand that outwardly it can kind of look like that, right? Because we believe in God. We receive the gospel. We look for the Spirit. And it seems like something we've chosen to do. And that's not untrue. But the idea of election says, what it's saying is that ultimately it comes from God. Like that the things you do, the works you perform, the outward things you manifest, when you receive the gospel, when you have faith in Jesus, that is actually God's work going on in you. And that it originates with Him. That your faith and your Christianity originates with God first. He chose you first. Whether you knew it or not. Whether you perceived it or not. I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with it because they're humble. And the idea like, I'm chosen by God and others are not is a externally could be perceived to be an arrogant thing to believe about yourself. Like I said, sometimes I've been accused of arrogance, and I understand because there is nothing more arrogant than saying, like, I'm going to speak on behalf of God. I mean, it is a bold thing to put it in the more gracious terminology. It requires boldness to speak on behalf of God. And to do it falsely requires arrogance, foolishness, and, it's a gutsy thing, especially if you know you are not really being called by God, if you're just sort of asserting yourself like as a false teacher, knowing who's a false. Because there are some people who are false teachers who I believe are sincere in that they're sincerely deceived. Like they don't know what they're teaching. They don't know what they're doing. There are other false teachers which know what they're doing and why they're doing it. And very often that is for material gain. And in my opinion, the more ostentatious display of someone's material wealth, the more they can be, you can safely say they're motivated by the pursuit of material wealth. I'll say this for my former teacher, Arnold Murray. I was down in Arkansas when I got married. He had no ostentatious display. I believe he was sincerely deceived. That's all. I don't believe he was, and he was sincerely kind of a jerk too, as far as I'm concerned, because he was abusive and manipulative, okay, in the way he talked to people. And I don't back down from that one bit. And for people who don't know what that's about, it's, you could, my website, there's a page on is it on the doctrine page? Yeah, either on it's not on the studies page. Somewhere on my website, there's a link to a secret section, or you can just look up my name and Arnold Murray, or the Shepherd's Chapel, any of that stuff, and combine it with my name, and you will find the section on my website that is probably, certainly generated more email to my website than any other. Let's say that. So, the days are shortened for our sake because God chose us and He wants us to be saved. And I know it's embarrassing to say so. I mean, I think it's not embarrassing, but it's like it feels wrong. I am chosen of God, therefore I'm saved and you are not. I mean, it's like the parable of the workers' wages. Sometimes they call it the parable of the vineyard, but I think it's not about the vineyard. It's about the workers' wages. That's the point. The parable of the workers' wages, Matthew 20. And they think that, they call it the parable of the laborers of the vineyard. I guess they want to focus on the work and not on the worth. Because the thing is, what about those that worked 1 hour? They received a full day's wages. Do you think they were maybe a little embarrassed that they got so much more than they deserved? How do they feel? They feel just like you ought to feel for being elect. Thankful, but also mindful. Like, never deceive yourself into thinking that you are the elect because you're better than other people, you're smarter than other people. If God wanted a smart person, He could do a lot better than me. People say, Paul, you're pretty smart. No doubt. Growing up, I remember getting the tests back. I was always in the 1%. 1% though is, and 1% of how many billions? There are hundreds of millions of people as every bit as smart as me, and among them are people who are way smarter than me. And if God wanted, he could have them instead. It sure isn't because I'm brainy. I mean, sure, that gives me gifts that I can function in a certain capacity to teach and all that. But I mean, I'm not under any delusion about how great my teachings are. You know what I mean? It's like I do as best I can with what I've been given. And that's all right. That might be just good. You got to use what you've been given for whatever purpose God has given it to you. It's fine. But we should not allow ourselves to be puffed up, thinking that, which means artificially inflated with a sense of our own importance. Because we aren't as important as we think, or we might think. God can, like, if these, what did Jesus say about when he was criticized by the Pharisees because they were crying Hosanna, and they said, bid them stop. Don't you hear what they're saying? And he said, if these were to keep their silence, the very rocks would cry out. And the Lord could certainly replace me with a rock. Okay? And, full stop. Okay. Then if any man shall say to you, lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. Don't believe it when they say, oh, there's Jesus. You know why? Because when Jesus comes, you won't have to have anyone tell you and say, hey, knock, knock, knock. Hey, did you hear? Jesus came back. Oh, really? I'll go turn on the news. Turn on the news. Wow, it looks like Jesus is back. I see it on the news. It's on the TV. Though I do, when Jesus comes, everyone's going to know when the real, like, immediately. And Christians will know because we're going to be transformed. We're going to be transformed. We're going to meet him in the air. And I don't believe that's the breath of life body or well, it is. You will be transformed into a different kind of body. And we will meet the Lord in the air. That's what it says. That's the promise of the resurrection. That the living, those who remain alive to the end when the Lord returns, will be raised and meet the Lord in the air, where he will have, and the dead in Christ rise first at that moment. And because why is that? Well, it says you got to be there to the last second when you see the dead rise, which is going to be actually seen on TV or whatever. I don't know. It's going to be seen by the whole world. The two witnesses are going to be laying dead for 3 days visibly. They will not suffer their dead bodies to be buried, and they will stand on their feet in great fear. The dead are going to rise at that moment. They will stand on their feet, and great fear will fall upon all those that see them. And you get to, if you're alive, you get to actually watch that instead of being sort of whisked out ahead of time. I mean, you wouldn't want to go ahead of the dead because you want to see the whole show. If you live to the end, I mean, if I live to the end, if I am not killed at some point along the way, or if I, don't ever see those days, if I were to live to the end, I would definitely want to stay to the very end of the show and see that, because that's the victory, man. I'd like a front row seat for that. Thank you. When the two witnesses rise, I want to see it, and then I'll go. Thanks, thanks, Lord. It's like you want to stay and see the last part, the horror of the two witnesses' death and the 3 days of waiting. You want to make sure you see what happens next. I want to see it with these eyes. So, there shall rise false Christs, false prophets, and the false Christ. I will add. And they will show great signs and wonders. In the book of Revelation, it says he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, the false prophet, which is Revelation chapter 13. And now they do signs and wonders in so much, meaning to the degree that if it was possible to deceive the elect, he would. Now, very elect is not a separate class of elect. Like we have the elect over here, and then there's the very elect over there. That's not real. It's not a thing. It's like saying the very ground you stand on, the very air you breathe. That's the way in which this word is being used here. It does not, it means like the actual. It does not mean it's not comparative. Like there's the elect and there's the very elect. I'm sorry, I don't mean to mock that, but I do mean to mock it because it is a, with my former teacher, and I say former, this is like, when did I stop studying with him? Well, I stopped studying with him after 4 years, but I didn't come out against him until 2007. So there was a period of about 93. Yeah. And 10 more years. It was like a total of 14 years about. He's been my former teacher, but that was over 10 years ago since I came out against him, and even I stopped studying with him even longer before that, like 20 years. Yeah. That's right. I remember this year was the year I could now say I've been teaching the Bible for over 25 years. Thank you. All right. And shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. That's how pernicious and that's how convincing it's going to be. That's what I was trying to warn you about with Antichrist. It's like we think we know. Like when I was young, I used to think, you know what I'll do? I'll go to people and I'll say, I remember I did this to a friend of mine. I'm like, look, I know you don't believe in God. I know you don't believe in Jesus, but if a supernatural guy ever comes out of the sky claiming to be God, it's Satan. It's not God. It's, you gotta understand. And unless there's a resurrection and blah blah blah. I tried to just give him the facts of what I thought the tribulation was, and I thought that will shield him against those events. That's ridiculous. That's not going to help at all. That does no good. Because it'll be so convincing that if God wasn't putting his finger on the scale, we would all be deceived by it. We'd be like, you know what? Because you're going to be dealing with the devil himself, or one infused with Satan's power. And what you think you know about this book is going to be out the window. Reality. You know what I mean? Like reality. Until it's like when those things are actually happening around you and the whole world is pressing you. Like I said, it's very easy to sort of, I would never. I'm not going to worship him. Man, you have no idea how tempting this time is going to be. And not just tempting, but how the kind of pressure that's going to be on you. It's going to be intense. The only reason you escape is because it is not possible. It's not possible to deceive the very elect. Can't do it. It's not possible. If it were possible, we would be deceived. Why is it not possible? Because we are God's elect. In the book of Revelation, there's a symbolic sealing of 144,000. I don't take that number literally, but it's they seal certain of the tribes of Israel, and that's Israel. It's like, for me, it's like, well, I'm a Gentile. I get, whenever they do a certain number of Israel, there's always like an innumerable company of Gentiles, because Israel's small. It's a tiny nation among many. Among many, many nations, it's a tiny nation. Like, I don't know what percent of the world population are Jews, but it's not a lot, okay? It's for tiny little people. So if there's 144,000 Jews, there'll be plenty of us. Don't you worry about that. Though, like I said, if there's if you have, I mean, I think it's still like a full third of the world is at least nominally Christian. Some fraction of that is going to fall away. But that still leaves, even if, like, there's 1% of all the people on the world is hundreds of millions. And if 1% of the people were saved, that would be few, relatively, compared to the overall population. And then you consider then the tribulation, at least if you take it literally, the book of Revelation says the third part of men will be slain. And when you think about the things that it describes, the disaster, it's going to be people dead. I mean, a lot of death. Why do you think those 4 horsemen go out? One of them's called death. It's like, well, there'll be no killing, though. That's not much of a tribulation. It's a lot of, whoa, it's more like a roller coaster. If people don't actually die, if you don't walk past piles of bodies, it's not real. It's just it's Halloween spooky. Ooh, look there's things, and and I'm getting kind of nauseous because it's twists and turns, but there's no actual danger. And I'm sorry, I can't see that point of view. And that's not a very widely held point of view, but I guess I like to look at different points of view. It's not possible. There will be false Christ, false prophets. We talked a lot about that. We already have plenty of false prophets, and there are even false Christs. They're not very popular, but I just remember when I was studying with some other former students. Well, they're not all former of the Shepherd's Chapel, but whatever. At the time, we were all students of the Shepherd's Chapel. I remember watching on TV. One of my friends put on this like weird cult of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. That's like, what it is like calling me P-A-U-L. I am P-A-U-L. P-A-U-L? Sounds kind of sounds kind of fancy, doesn't it? P-A-U-L. And what they were doing is taking the sacred name of God and saying the letters like A, B, C, D or Y, H, V, H, except they said it in Hebrew, so it came out Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And they said it fast, so it sounded like this weird name, P-A-U-L. And I realized it was this dude who was in jail, and like his followers were broadcasting and collecting money for him because he was God. He was the Messiah, the second coming of Jesus. And they promote themselves like there was the Branch Davidians, right? They didn't deserve to get burned alive, but by the government, but they were following a false Messiah. I don't remember his name. It's not worth. I think I remember his name, but I'm not going to say it because I'm not positive, and who cares? False messiahs don't need extra publicity, as far as I'm concerned. The signs and wonders, like I said, being able to work miracles and show signs and wonders, it's kind of very persuasive. I remember I described it to an atheist once, and he said, "Are you kidding me?" Because he thought that was so like that's what God's gonna let happen. It's like tossing a gun into a knife fight. Is what he described. Like two guys are fighting, and you like scoot a gun in, like toss a gun into the midst of them. Like that's what how he saw like. The idea that Satan being cast out into the earth. He said that's the worst thing he'd ever heard. And no, it's the worst thing that's ever going to happen to the world. It's the great tribulation. There's nothing like it, nor ever has been, nor ever will be. Behold, I've told you before. I'm telling you ahead of time. And we're down to the last minute. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. He's in the secret chambers. Believe it not. Notice he's given opposites. This is why I give different perspectives on Antichrist. Is Jesus telling you which it's going to be? No, he's just saying he's out in the desert, out in the open, and out in the place you can go out. Or he's hid away here. You know what I mean? It's totally opposite. The secret chambers. These are the secret chambers. The chambers of secrets. Don't believe it. Either way. For as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. And you're going to see it from everywhere, all at the same time. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. One of my favorite sections of the book of Revelation. And we'll pick up with this verse tomorrow. One of my favorite sections is a section where the angel calls out to the fowls of heaven and says, "Come and gather yourselves together to the supper of the great God, that ye may eat the flesh of kings and the flesh of captains, the flesh of mighty men, the flesh of horses and them that sit on them, the flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great." And the birds are called together to feast on the flesh of the enemies of Christ. Because when he comes, he's going to make his own stack of bodies. He's going to utterly destroy their armies. Because the devil's going to gather together an army to fight God. Now, he's not going to probably sell it that way. But he's going to, you think about, let's say if he's at Jerusalem, he's going to have just all the people of the world just gathered there. Not everybody of the planet. But what I mean is, I mean that in a hyperbolic sense of, it's going to have an inrush. There's going to be a lot of people there. A lot of people at that location. It's just the place. This is why you do not want to be in Judea when Jesus comes. I mean, and I'm not even talking to Christians at that point. I don't think that's what he's saying, per se. Let him that be in Judea flee to the mountains. Some of us will be there against our will. At least the two witnesses. And as far as I'm concerned, the two witnesses, like I said, are the two churches, which, because of in the book of Revelation, the candlesticks. I suggest you look at my study on Revelation for that information. I don't have time to go into it now because we're at the end of a study. I shouldn't have brought up a new subject. But the bodies are going to be laid out. The corpses of many, many people. That's why you don't want to be there, because when Jesus comes, he's going to come with 100-pound hailstones, pounding the corpses. And I think that pounding from the giant hailstones is where we get the analogy of he treads the winepress of the wrath of Almighty God. Because out of the winepress shall come blood to the horse's bridle. A deep river of blood from all those whom Jesus will slay when he returns. That's the way it's portrayed in the book of Revelation. And you will be able to, it's interesting, as the lightning shines from the east to the west, so shall his coming be. But you'll also be able to tell where he is by the massive cloud of carrion birds, which will be gathered together to feast on all the corpses that he will pile up. So, anyways, thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to continuing this topic with you tomorrow. Yeah, okay, good. Anyways, thanks for joining me this day. I look forward to studying with you tomorrow. I said that? Okay, and let's just go, wait, no, I got that, okay.